The marble floors gleamed like frozen rivers beneath the morning light, and the sound of a child sobbing drifted through the mansion like a haunting echo. Aria Monroe froze mid-stroke of her cleaning cloth as the sound pierced the stillness again. It was not a hungry cry, not tired, not defiant. It was the sound of panic, raw and trapped like something clawing from the inside out. She turned toward the grand staircase, her hand trembling. 5 days ago, she had been told never to go beyond the third floor. The upper wing was private, off-limits, sacred. But that sound kept pulling at her heart the way memories do when they refuse to die. From somewhere below came the calm warning voice of Mrs. Hartman, the head housekeeper. "Miss Monroe, stay clear of the upper wing, please." But Aria was already climbing. The air thickened with the scent of polish and silence. At the end of the hall, a thin strip of light slipped through a half-open door, flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, she saw him. A small boy curled against a bookshelf, rocking forward and back, striking his forehead with each motion. The sensory projector threw shifting colors across his skin, blue, green, red, a kaleidoscope of distress. Aria's throat tightened. She had seen this before years ago, when her little brother did the same thing under the kitchen table of their tiny apartment. She had promised herself she would never watch another child break like that without reaching out. Slowly, she crouched near the doorway, careful not to startle him. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, barely audible. "I am not going to touch you. I am just sitting right here." The boy's rocking slowed for a breath. Aria lifted her hands, palms open, a gesture of peace. Then she traced a simple motion across her chest, a sign she had not used in years. Safe. For a moment, he looked at her, just a flicker of recognition, then his eyes returned to the floor. She held her breath, waiting. A sudden voice cut through the air behind her. "What are you doing in this room?" The command was sharp, polished, and furious. Aria turned. A tall man filled the doorway, his posture straight as a blade, his face drawn tight with disbelief. Ethan Caldwell, owner of this glass and marble palace, the man who had hired her without ever meeting her eyes. "I heard him crying," she said, standing quickly. "I thought he might be in danger." "You were told not to enter this floor," he said. "Step away from my son." She obeyed, but when Ethan tried to lift the boy, the child screamed and kicked the air in wild terror. His cries doubled the sound, filling every corner of the room. Ethan froze, uncertain how to hold him without breaking him. Aria stepped closer quietly. "May I?" she asked. He did not stop her. The moment she knelt beside the boy, the noise began to fade. His small hands reached for her sleeve, gripping it tight, as if her presence was the one thing keeping the world from shattering. The silence that followed was heavy and fragile. Ethan stood motionless, his jaw tight, his breathing uneven. "What did you do?" he asked. She looked up at him, her voice soft. "I just listened. My brother was like him once. He could not speak either. Sometimes silence needs company, not correction." Ethan said nothing. His son had gone still in her arms, head resting against her shoulder, as though he had known her all his life. For the first time in months, the mansion was quiet without sorrow. Later that day, Aria stood at the bottom of the staircase, expecting to be fired. She had crossed a boundary, touched a secret she was not supposed to know. The chandelier light shimmered coldly above her. She turned toward the servants' hallway when his voice called out. "Miss Monroe!" He was standing by the office door, still in his gray suit. His tie loosened, the expression on his face unreadable. "Come in, please." The office was immaculate, the kind of space built to keep emotion out. Ethan gestured toward a chair and sat across from her. "You handled him like someone trained." "I am not trained," she said. "I used to help my brother when he had episodes. He passed away a few years ago." Ethan leaned back, his gaze fixed on the desk, but softer now. "No therapist has managed to calm Noah like that. Not in 2 years. They all failed. You walked in, and it stopped." She met his eyes for the first time. "I did not fix him. I saw him." The words hung there, suspended between two people who had spent too long pretending strength was the same as control. Ethan's hand loosened around his pen. "What is your name again?" "Aria Monroe," she said. "You clean the East Wing." "Yes, sir." He paused, considering something unseen. "I want to make you an offer. I need someone who can reach Noah, someone consistent. Not another expert with the clipboard. Someone he already trusts." "I am not a nanny," she said quietly. "No," he replied. You are something better. The silence stretched until he added, I will double your pay. You will stay in the staff wing. No more cleaning duties. Health coverage. Weekends off. Arya felt her chest tighten. The thought of stability was intoxicating. Her mother's medical bills were piling up back home in Atlanta, and every paycheck vanished before the month's end. Still, she hesitated. What if I fail him? Ethan's voice softened. You won't. He trusts you. That makes you the only one who has not failed him yet. When she left the office, the sun was already dipping low behind the glass windows. The mansion glowed with gold light, but felt heavier than before. She looked up at the fifth floor, knowing that behind one of those doors, a boy finally slept peacefully. That night, she sat alone in her new room at the edge of the estate. It was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a single lamp. She placed a framed photo of her brother on the nightstand. The memory of his laughter filled the space around her like a ghost that meant no harm. At dawn, she returned to the upper floor. Noah sat by the window, tracing shapes on the glass with his finger. Morning, she said softly. No answer, but his body did not stiffen this time. She took a seat across from him, cross-legged on the carpet, and waited. After a minute, he pushed a wooden block toward her with his toe. She smiled and nudged a blue one back. The game began wordless, pure rhythm. From the doorway, Ethan watched unseen. The woman who had entered his life 5 days ago had already changed the air inside his home. The tension that had once filled the halls now seemed thinner, replaced by something quieter, almost sacred. Hours later in the kitchen, Mrs. Hartman set down a tray of tea and said without looking up, He has not smiled in years, you know. Arya glanced toward the stairs. Maybe he just needed someone not afraid of silence. The days settled into a pattern. Morning games with color blocks. Afternoon walks in the garden when the air was mild. Noah began to hum low sounds, not quite words, but close enough to make Arya's heart ache. Ethan watched these changes with cautious disbelief. He no longer barked orders. He began asking questions instead. What helps him sleep? What songs calm him? What do I do when he shuts down? One evening, Arya found him in the music room, the grand piano untouched and covered with dust. He sat before it, his hands hovering above the keys, as if afraid the sound might wake the dead. She stepped closer quietly. Do you play? Not anymore, he said. She smiled faintly. Maybe you should. He glanced up, and if it hurts, then it means there is still something left to heal. He pressed one key, then another, the melody hesitant, broken like speech returning after long silence. Noah appeared at the doorway, drawn by the sound. When Arya began to hum softly, he took a step forward, eyes wide and still. Ethan's fingers slowed. Noah smiled, just a tiny upward curve of his mouth, but enough to stop the room. For the first time, Ethan looked at Arya not as an employee, but as someone carrying light into the cracks he had spent years sealing shut. The next morning, she woke early, the sunlight pouring through the thin curtains. She heard laughter, faint and real, from upstairs. She followed the sound to the nursery. Ethan was sitting on the floor helping Noah build a small tower of blocks, his movements careful and clumsy, but tender. When he noticed her, he smiled uncertain. He wanted to show me how to make a bridge, he said quietly. You are doing fine, she replied. He looked at her longer than he meant to, and something in that gaze told her the house was changing, not through wealth or instruction, but through presence. Later that night, as Arya walked past the portraits hanging in the hallway, she stopped before one she had never seen closely before. Lena Caldwell, the late wife, a woman with kind eyes caught forever in soft focus. Arya wondered if Lena would have approved of her being here. Maybe yes, maybe no. But she knew one thing: Noah was healing, and healing did not belong to one person's permission. She went to bed listening to the faint hum of the piano below and the whisper of a child's breathing through the baby monitor on her nightstand. Somewhere between those sounds, she felt something she had not felt in years: purpose. Outside the mansion, the city lights flickered like distant promises. Inside the walls that had once been a tomb of grief began to breathe again. Ethan stood by the window of his study, watching the reflection of his son, asleep in another room, and the woman who had somehow bridged the silence between them. He did not yet understand what she was to them, but he knew the house no longer felt empty. For Arya, the night stretched quiet and full. Tomorrow would come with new routines, new doubts, and new risks, but for now, she closed her eyes and let herself rest in the soundless warmth of belonging. She had stepped into a stranger's home 5 days ago, and somehow stepped into the center of two wounded hearts that needed her far more than they knew. And though she would never say it aloud, the truth shimmered in her stillness. She was not there to clean the glass or sweep the dust. She was there to teach a billionaire and his son how to listen to silence and to find love hiding inside it. Rain whispered against the glass walls as morning stretched across the Caldwell estate. Arya stood in the kitchen watching the light move through the mom. Her world had settled into a rhythm that felt fragile like spun glass. Each day began with Noah tracing colors on the window and ended with Ethan lingering longer in the rooms where laughter had begun to return. Yet beneath the calm, she felt a pulse of unease, like a tremor beneath the floorboards waiting for the right moment to crack open. Noah was changing faster than anyone had expected. He no longer hid from sound. He hummed along when Ethan played the piano. He reached for Arya's hand when they crossed the garden. Small miracles unfolded like pages of a secret diary. But with each new step, the outside world began to notice. The staff whispered. The tabloids hunted for stories about the reclusive billionaire whose son had not been seen in years, and about the woman who had suddenly become a constant presence in his home. One afternoon, Ethan invited Arya to his office. He looked different, more human, less polished. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "You have given Noah something none of us could." Arya smiled faintly. He gave it to himself. "I just stood beside him while he found it." He hesitated before speaking again. "I want to try something new. You will help me learn his signs. I want to talk to him the way you do." His tone was earnest, almost boyish. She nodded, surprised. The lessons began that evening in the living room. Their hands moved in halting rhythm shapes in the air, carrying meaning without words. Noah watched from the rug, curious. When Ethan misformed a sign, Arya corrected him with a gentle touch on the wrist. He looked up, meeting her eyes. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Something unsaid drifted between them, soft but undeniable. Days blurred into weeks. Arya found herself in spaces she never imagined. Private dinners where she sat with Ethan and Noah, reading picture books by candlelight. Quiet mornings when Ethan brewed her coffee because she had fallen asleep in the playroom. The mansion that once felt cold now pulsed with ordinary life. But gossip travels faster than warmth. It began with a photograph. Ethan walking beside Arya through the garden, Noah between them holding their hands. The image spread across gossip sites within hours. "Billionaire's new mystery woman," one headline read. "Housemaid or heartthrob," another mocked. By evening, reporters gathered outside the gates. Flashbulbs popped through the fog. Arya's name became a rumor in places she had never been. Inside the mansion, Ethan's board members called, demanding explanations. He ignored them until one voice on the phone said the words that made his blood turn to ice. "The story is hurting the company. You need to control it or you will lose investors." Arya watched him pace the study later that night. His jaw was tight, his shoulders hard. "I am sorry," she whispered. "This is not your fault," he said, though his voice trembled. "People will believe what they want. I hired you because you are the only one who can reach my son, not because of what they think." Still, she felt the distance, growing invisible but heavy. She spent more time upstairs with Noah, letting him draw shapes in chalk across the playroom floor. The boy's laughter was her anchor, the sound that kept her from breaking. Then came the knock at the door. Two strangers in suits stood there holding clipboards. "Child Welfare Services. We received a report of potential neglect and psychological harm to a minor." Ethan's face drained of color. He demanded to know who filed the complaint, but the agents refused to answer. They began their inspection immediately. Arya's hands shook as she guided them through the house, showing Noah's room, his therapy tools, his journals of progress. The agents took notes impassively. Ethan followed behind like a shadow ready to shatter. When one of them asked to observe Noah's interaction with caregivers, Arya knelt beside the boy. He was anxious, eyes darting between the strangers. "It's all right," she whispered. "We are just showing them your drawings." He did not move. His breathing quickened. Ethan stepped forward, but Arya shook her head. She signed to Noah slowly the phrase she had taught him for calm. "Safe. Home. Loved." Then she pressed her palm gently over her heart and smiled. Noah looked at her and for the first time in 2 years spoke a single word. Mama. The room froze. The agents exchanged looks. The pen stopped scratching paper. Ethan's lips parted soundless. Tears filled Arya's eyes. Noah crawled into her lap, resting his head against her chest. The agents said nothing more that day. They left quietly, promising to close the report. When the door shut, Ethan turned to Arya, his voice breaking. He spoke again. Mama. He called you that. Arya nodded slowly, unable to speak. She knew what it meant and what it did not. It was not confusion or delusion. It was love in the only language he trusted. The next morning, the newspapers exploded. Billionaire's autistic son calls housemaid mom. Some mocked, others romanticized. The internet turned their lives into a circus. Strangers sent letters of sympathy and hate in equal measure. One evening, while Arya tucked Noah into bed, she found a message slipped under her door. Leave while you can. He will destroy you like he did his wife. Her hands trembled. She did not show it to Ethan. But fear crept into her sleep like smoke. Days later, Ethan confronted her. Someone has been leaking personal information. He tossed a file onto the table: photographs, financial details, old addresses. The leak came from my former assistant, Rebecca Thorne. She is working with my competitors. They are trying to smear both of us. Arya looked down at the photographs, her face in each one smiling, unaware of the lens. She felt exposed like a specimen under light. What will you do? She asked. Fight, he said. I will not let them turn your kindness into scandal. The fight became public. Lawsuits, press conferences, interviews. Reporters camped at the gates again. Through it all, Noah clung to Arya, refusing to let her out of sight. She barely slept. Ethan looked exhausted, his suits wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Yet every night he still sat with them at dinner, as if routine was the only shield they had left. One evening after Noah had fallen asleep, Arya found Ethan standing on the balcony, staring into the storm. You should let me go, she said quietly. This is too much. You have a company to protect. I will only make things worse. He turned sharply. Worse, he said. You think saving my son is worse. You think giving him back his voice is worse. She shook her head, tears forming. The world will not see it that way. They will see what they want to see. He stepped closer, his voice low. Then let them. They can have their headlines. I only care about what happens inside this house. You and Noah are what matters. His words struck her harder than any shout. For a moment, the distance between them dissolved, replaced by something fierce and dangerous. Then he turned away, gripping the railing until his knuckles whitened. Go inside before you catch cold, he said. The next day, reporters broke a news story. Leaked emails, allegations of misconduct. Ethan's company stock plummeted. He called an emergency meeting. Arya waited at home, holding Noah, who sensed the tension without understanding it. Hours later, Ethan returned drained. They want my resignation, he said quietly. But I will not give them that satisfaction. I will tell the truth. 2 nights later, a press conference filled every news channel. Ethan stood before a wall of cameras, his tie loose, his voice steady. The rumors about my relationship with Miss Monroe are untrue. But if what they see is a man who trusts the woman who saved his child, then let that be my scandal. She is not my employee. She is my family's salvation. The statement silenced the room. For a moment, even the reporters forgot to shout questions. Back at the mansion, Arya watched the broadcast, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had never wanted fame, only safety for the boy who had taught her to breathe again. When Ethan came home that night, the air between them was heavy but calm. Noah ran to him holding a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures standing hand in hand under a sun. Arya, Ethan, Noah. The caption, written in uneven letters, read home. Ethan looked at her with eyes full of exhaustion and something gentler. Maybe this is what family looks like, he said. Not perfect, just honest. The following week, the lawsuit against Rebecca began. The courtroom smelled of old wood and tension. Reporters filled every seat. Arya sat behind Ethan, unnoticed by most, but feeling every word. The opposing lawyer painted her as an opportunist, a woman who used emotion to climb into privilege. She bit her tongue, fighting tears. Then Ethan took the stand. He spoke without notes. About his wife's death, about the years of silence that followed, about Noah's world of fear and light, and then about the woman who had walked into that silence and refused to leave. The courtroom grew still as he finished. The truth is simple. She gave us back our voices. That is not manipulation. That is grace. When the verdict came weeks later, it was in their favor. Rebecca fled the city disgraced. Ethan's company recovered. Yet Arya could not shake the feeling of fragility that lingered. Too much light can still burn. That night after the celebration, she stood by the garden fountain. The air smelled of rain and jasmine. Ethan approached quietly. "You could leave now," he said. "Start over somewhere else away from all this noise." She looked at him, her voice steady. "Could you?" He smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Noah called from the window above, his voice bright and clear. "Come see." He was pointing to the sky where fireworks from a nearby festival burst into color. Arya laughed softly. Ethan looked up too, and for the first time in years allowed himself to hope that the world might still forgive him for being human. Inside the house, the lights flickered. The piano waited, and the story that began in silence moved towards something like love. Morning arrived like a deep breath after a storm. The Caldwell estate lay quiet beneath the soft haze of spring. The newspapers that once screamed accusations now carried headlines about courage and recovery. The noise outside had dulled, but inside the house a different silence was growing, one that Arya could feel between each heartbeat. It was not the cold emptiness she had known months ago. This silence was warm, tender, uncertain. The kind that arrives when love begins to ask for more than it is ready to claim. Ethan spent his mornings at the piano again, his sleeves rolled up, his face softer. Noah sat beside him, tapping the keys at random, filling the room with broken but a joyous sound. Arya watched from the doorway, a cup of coffee in her hands. She felt the pulse of belonging, but also a tremor of fear. Every time Ethan looked up at her, she sensed the question in his eyes, and the wall she had built inside her heart quivered a little more. Outside, the world still wanted its story. Reporters wrote of redemption, investors returned. Ethan's company began to rise again. Yet the whispers never truly stopped. At charity galas, people asked where his mysterious housekeeper was. At board meetings, men joked about fairy tales and saviors. Ethan ignored them all, but Arya could feel the strain in him, like the pull of a tide he refused to acknowledge. One evening after dinner, Noah asked to play a game. He brought out the old blocks from months ago and began building small towers. Arya and Ethan sat with him in silence, watching the careful rhythm of his hands. When the tower fell, Noah looked up, startled. Arya smiled and whispered, "It is all right. Things fall so we can build them again." Ethan's gaze lingered on her. He thought of everything that had fallen in his life and how she had somehow built him back without asking for anything in return. The following week, an envelope arrived addressed to Ethan in thick, elegant handwriting. It was from the legal team handling the last of the court settlements. Among the papers was something unexpected, a digital copy of an old video from his late wife Lena, found in a recovered drive. Ethan held the device for a long time before pressing play. Arya was in the room dusting the shelves when the first image appeared. Lena sat at the piano, her hair falling over her shoulders, smiling at the camera. "If you are watching this," she said softly, "then I am probably not there anymore." She looked down at the keys, then back up with eyes full of quiet strength. "Ethan, if our son ever finds someone who can hear him the way I do, promise me you will listen. Do not run from it. Healing will not look the way you expect. It never does." The video ended in silence. Arya's breath caught. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the screen, as if the past and the present had collided in front of him. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. She knew. Ethan turned toward her, and for the first time in years, tears slid freely down his face. "She always did," he said. "She always knew how to forgive me before I even asked." Later that night, he found Arya in the garden under the old oak tree. The moonlight painted her in silver. "I do not know what to do with what she said," he admitted. "It feels like permission, but also a test." Arya looked at him, her expression steady. "Maybe it is not about permission. Maybe it is about letting go." The following days passed quietly until the letter from the court arrived confirming their victory. The lawsuit was closed, all charges dismissed. Yet instead of celebration, Arya felt an ache in her chest she could not name. She had come here as a housekeeper and somehow become the center of a story she never sought. She began to wonder what came next. That evening, she packed a small suitcase. When Ethan returned from work, he found her standing by the window of the guest room, her coat folded neatly on the bed. "You are leaving," he said. She nodded. "It is time. The storm is over. You and Noah do not need me anymore." His voice was low and strained. "That is not true. You are part of us." Arya shook her head gently. "I was never meant to stay forever. I was meant to help you both find your way back to each other. Now you have." He stepped closer, his hands trembling. "What about my way back to you?" She looked at him, eyes glistening. "Do not make this harder. You know what people will say, what they will twist. I cannot be the reason your peace becomes another scandal." He wanted to protest, but the words would not come. Noah appeared in the doorway, clutching his stuffed bear eyes wide with confusion. Arya knelt and took his hands. "You are so brave," she whispered. "Promise me you will keep smiling even when I am not here." He shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. She signed the word home and pressed his hand to her heart. The next morning she was gone. The house felt hollow again, though sunlight still filled every corner. Ethan went through the motions of life meetings, calls, piano lessons with Noah. But each sound felt thin without her laughter floating through the halls. Noah began to draw pictures of her every day, leaving them on his father's desk as silent prayers. Weeks passed, then months. Spring turned to summer. The world moved on, but the ache did not. One afternoon, Ethan found Noah in the garden showing a butterfly the sign for safe, the same one Arya had taught him. He watched his son smile and realized the lesson had never been about healing the child alone. It was about learning to live again himself. That night, he stood by the piano and played the melody Lena used to love, but this time he added the notes Arya had hummed months before. The two songs wove together seamlessly, old grief and new hope no longer at war. When he finished, he whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you." 3 months later, Ethan and Noah attended a charity event for autism awareness at a downtown art center. The hall buzzed with quiet energy paintings lining the walls, each created by children who saw the world in colors others missed. As they walked through the gallery, Noah tugged at his sleeve, pointing excitedly toward one corner. There she was, Arya standing among a small group of children, guiding them through a sign language activity, her laughter light and unguarded. For a moment, Ethan could not move. The sight of her alive and radiant cut through him like sunlight through fog. Noah ran ahead, shouting her name, his voice bright and clear. Arya turned in surprise and eyes widening. When she saw them, her smile trembled, but did not fade. Noah threw his arms around her waist. "You came," he said. Arya knelt, holding him close. "You grew," she whispered. "You are shining." Ethan approached slowly, unsure if he was allowed to step into this new chapter she had built. She looked up at him, and the distance of months vanished in a single heartbeat. He asked softly, "You are teaching here?" She nodded. "I wanted to give what your son gave me. A reason to listen again." He smiled faintly. "I should have known you would build another world out of silence." They walked together through the exhibit. Children waved at Arya. Some parents recognized Ethan and whispered, but he ignored them. At the center of the hall hung a large painting drawn by one of Arya's students. 3 figures holding hands under a sun. The same drawing Noah had made months ago, recreated in vivid color. Underneath it, in small letters, were the words, "Safe Home Loved." Arya's eyes filled with tears. Noah reached for her hand and signed the word home again. Ethan watched, unable to speak. The crowd around them blurred until only the 3 of them remained inside that quiet bubble of light. Later, as the event ended, Arya stepped outside into the garden behind the center. The evening was soft, the city lights glimmering in the distance. Ethan joined her, standing a few feet away. For a long time, neither spoke. Then he said, "I thought I understood what love was. I thought it meant keeping things safe, controlled, predictable. But you taught me that love is listening even when the other person has no words." She turned toward him, eyes shining in the dim light. "And you taught me that silence is not empty. It is just waiting to be heard." He took a slow breath. "I do not want to trap you or define you. But if you ever wanted to come home, it would not be the same without you." She smiled gently. "Maybe home is not a place, Ethan. Maybe it is what happens when people finally stop running from what they feel." From the building behind them came the faint sound of children laughing. Noah appeared at the door holding a paper lantern painted with stars. He ran to them, his small voice ringing clear. Come see. They followed him to the open courtyard where dozens of lanterns floated above the reflecting pool. The night shimmered with golden light, each lantern carrying a wish written by the children. Noah held his high above his head and whispered, Mama, look. Our wish. Ethan placed his hand over Arya's, hers, over Noah's. Together, they released the lantern. It rose slowly, swaying toward the sky, carrying with it the fragments of all they had lost and all they had found again. The reflection rippled across the water, turning grief into grace. After the crowd dispersed, they stayed by the pool. The air smelled of jasmine and promise. Arya looked up at the stars and said quietly, I used to think healing meant forgetting, but it doesn't. It means remembering without pain. He nodded, and loving without fear. The clock tower in the distance struck 9. Noah yawned, curling against Arya's side. Ethan watched them both and felt something settle inside him, a peace that was not loud or grand, but whole. When it was time to leave, Arya walked them to the car. Noah hugged her tight. See you tomorrow, he said. She smiled. Tomorrow and every day after. Ethan met her eyes over the boy's head and understood that whatever name they gave this connection, it would last beyond rumor, beyond time. Back at the mansion, he tucked Noah into bed and returned to the piano. The melody came easily, now filled with warmth. In his mind, he could still see Arya's lantern rising into the night sky. He whispered a promise into the quiet. No more running, no more silence, only listening. At the same moment across the city, Arya sat in her small apartment overlooking the river. She opened her journal, the one she had not written in since leaving. On the first page, she wrote, Healing is not found in words. It is found in the spaces between them. Then she smiled, closed the book, and looked out the window. The camera of life pulled back slowly, the river glimmering below the city lights, stretching far and endless. In one corner of the world, a man played a piano. In another, a woman wrote by lamplight. Between them, a child dreamed of stars and safe homes. The night held them together, invisible but strong. The silence that had once divided them now hummed with life. And so their story ended, not with declarations or endings, but with a quiet continuation, the kind that only hearts can hear. In the echo of that silence, love lived on, speaking fluently in the language of understanding, in the music of forgiveness, in the rhythm of breath, shared across distance. The world moved forward, but somewhere deep inside its noise, there was still that house, once broken, now whole, once cold, now alive again, with the sound of belonging.